Hello and welcome to episode number 373 of your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I am Darth Vaydaniel, and this week we have two guests on the Reasons I'm Broke podcast. Both of them are returning, actually, and the first one is Justin, Treasure Hunting Sonic, massive Instagram account. You've seen him on the show before. You've seen retweets and interactions between him and I as we've done some collaborations on his channel in the past, and then, of course, right here on the show. He's on to help with today's very special interview. Justin, say hi to the Brokehead Core.
How's it going? Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, very much appreciate you coming on and helping out with this, especially as someone who has been keeping up with the comic every single month as it releases, to say the least, because your collection is massive. So keeping up with Sonic, period, is really what you have under your belt. So huge thanks for coming on with this interview.
Thank you for having me.
And as I mentioned, it was all about the comic books that we are absolutely going to cover today. And we have on here, once again, returning to the show, it is the writer of Sonic the Hedgehog, IDW Sonic the Hedgehog, currently, for the massive storyline that is involving all of the different Sonic characters, main and new ones. A lot of new characters that have been introduced in this IDW run. We have the writer Ian Flynn returning on the show. Welcome back, Ian.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
We are really excited to get to 2 years of the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book, as we're going to hit that up in early 2020 with issue 25. Is that going to be an oversized issue compared to the normal month-to-month?
It'll be a little extra long, yeah. We got a lot to cover in that one. Big turning point in the story arc.
So from the beginning, we've had anyone familiar with how the Sonic comic has gone, is it's essentially a jumping on point from IDW. For all intents, can we call it a reboot in the Sonic comic?
Reboot seems to imply that it is from an original source. Mm-hmm. IDW Sonic is its own thing. It's not Archie Sonic 3.0. It's not Game Sonic 2.5. It's its own thing. It's very closely inspired by the game events, but it's its own beast.
Gotcha. And Justin, as someone who did collect the Archie comic books, and obviously you've played every Sonic out there and watched all of the different media content, how do you think it fits into the current Sonic world? Do you view it as well as like its own world inspired by the game events?
Yes. As it takes place after Forces, I kind of view it as its own like universe, technically. And I think they did a great job of, continuing the story from the game and, branching it out in its like own little timeline. And, the way they've been able to utilize all the characters and everything, and, the whole Dr. Eggman story and everything. I think it's been great, building this world.
This will be a show, Ian, of us as readers and fans gushing over this work, so be prepared for that.
No, positive feedback, my one weakness.
I know, this is the internet. What's going on, right? No, I will tell you, and I think I'll have Justin share his thoughts too, but over these last almost 2 years of IDW Sonic the Hedgehog, I manage a comic book shop to any new listeners, and to the subscribers that I talk to that are subscribed to the comic book, they reflect the same sentiment, that it continues the world of Sonic comic books in a strong direction, and stronger, as we are getting these new characters that are not only original properties, but they stand on their own very strongly. And I think you've done an amazing job in taking the time to flesh these characters out, so that they're not simply new characters for the comics, but they're also characters that are going to have their fan base behind them. And all of the different artists that are working on Sonic the Hedgehog have done an amazing job in not just helping bring these characters to life, but in designing these what's bound to be new staples in the Sonic world.
Thank you. Kind of along that line, as much as I and the other creatives have put into this, the fans and the readers really also deserve a round of applause. The amount of love and support they've shown this title has been insane. Case in point, The two comic original characters, Tangle the Lemur and Whisper the Wolf, have their own miniseries, which will be wrapping up pretty soon. And the fact that we got not only a spin-off miniseries from the main book within its first 2 years, but that it focuses on comic original characters is mind-blowing. And that's purely from the fan response. They were so well received, and everyone out there who's listening and reading, your response was so overwhelmingly positive that that's why the mini came to be. I not to knock the old work that I did, but the idea of the original stuff we had during the Archie Sonic run getting that kind of treatment is completely foreign to me. So the fact that we have this with IDW is something very special. So big thank you to all the readers and all the supporters out there, because you guys rock and you are really helping this book along.
And Justin, out of the original characters that we've seen here, Whisper, Tangle, Rough and Tumble, Mimic, Jewel, we've got all kinds of massive cast now that we've been reading about as each issue comes out. Are there certain ones that you've gravitated more towards as your favorites from this new line?
Well, since we introduced Tangle and Whisper, have definitely been my favorites. Rough and Tumble, I really like them too, because every iteration of Sonic, whether it be the TV show, whatever, has had like two main villains that were two side villains that kind of work together, kind of like a Scratch and Grounder from Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, the two from Sonic Underground, I don't remember their names.
Sleet and Dingo.
Sleet and Dingo, yes. And I see Rough and Tumble as kind of in that same spirit.
And I'm really glad that Tangle and Whisper have had that success with the miniseries, because it was one that I cross-pulled for all of the Sonic the Hedgehog subs, and not a single one kicked it back. They all went, yep, add that to my sub as well. And I think that's great, because not only is that fantastic for these two of the new characters and two of the ones that have really shined the brightest, or at least taken a hold with fans especially, but I think that absolutely tells IDW the readers are open to more of these types of miniseries. And as you mentioned, Ian, it's huge that they're original characters that have retained those sales. And you didn't have to have like Sonic the Hedgehog featuring Tangle and Whisper miniseries. It was called Sonic the Hedgehog Tangle Whisper, and it focused on them. It told the origin of, I think we just had the origin of Whisper in the latest issue.
Yep. And it wasn't, 100% banking on them, because you have to have Sonic in the title, clearly. That's going to catch the eye of your casual reader. And we kind of cheat a little bit, because you do have Sonic show up in the first issue. It's just Mimic in disguise. So you have that Paramount mascot character catching the eye of the casual reader, but then we put the little spin on it with the mystery of why is Whisper after that person. We fold in a little bit of the Sega Sonic lore, Dr. Eggman. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read number 3, the Shadow Android showing up, just to make it feel like it's part of the Sonic universe. It isn't just our special unique babbies that we're doing our own thing with. They are part of Sonic's world, and this is an expansion of that lore. But at the same time, it is focusing on Tangle and Whisper, and what makes them so unique and fun to work together. And it's neat that we got this, man. I'm still kind of bamboozled by it. It's like, oh yeah, we got to do that. That's fun.
It's fantastic. Justin, as a collector of everything Sonic, is there a piece of merchandise that you would want to see based on these new characters? We've seen a little bit with the one I've seen is with Tangle, but is there something that comes to mind right away? And I ask you because you came up with that idea of the Sonic pizza cutter. What do you see with these new characters?
Well, for one, I definitely want to see Tangle and Whisper action figures at some point.
Yes.
That IDW has branched out into board games and the dice game and other stuff like that. And clothes, it seems now, because we have pajama sets showing up with Tangle on them. I would love to see an action figure line of, IDW Sonic. Maybe Tangle with the stretchy tail. That would be really cool. And Sega Shop US, during San Diego Comic-Con, they released those Tangle and Whisper pins, which sadly I didn't get the Whisper. It sold out too fast. But yeah, definitely action figures. I definitely think people would buy them. we're always talking about in the collectors groups about obscure characters getting action figures, and they also always become the rarest, like Sonic Boom Sticks, her action figure and plush doll are now like, go for well over $100. So, if IDW did come out with a line of Sonic action figures, I definitely see Tingle and Whisper, shooting up there, being that they're kind of more obscure characters, not totally, front and center. But I would love to see those.
All great ideas. I think the one that I immediately kind of, when I saw the character, it was like, all right, well, that seems like an obvious one when and if this eventually happens. But with Jewel the Beetle, I don't know if you've seen like those sort of fluorescent type of material, but you can make a really nice plushie and have that as the outside material to have it kind of change colors.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would work really well. And as we're approaching these 2 years of Sonic the Hedgehog 25, are we seeing a continue? Because this story now, it has ramped up even more as far as the stakes. If there's so many members getting infected and a lot of favorites too, that it's like, holy crap! I didn't see that happening so quickly for this character, but this character over here is helping out the whole movement. And this story has had a bigger impact on this comic world. Are we going to see the continuous ramp up with as we head into 2020?
Yeah, 25 is going to kind of mark the point where things get their absolute worst, where all the chips are down, where our heroes, those that have survived, are backed into the literal last corner that they can possibly go to. And then from there, it is the desperate struggle to beat back the darkness and hopefully find a way to right all that has gone wrong. And not everyone's going to agree on how to do it. Not everyone's going to necessarily make it to the finish line. But 25 kind of marks the point where it's the apex of all the drama for the Metal Virus saga. And then after that, it's just all the crazy downhill race to the end.
And you had mentioned drama, which worked out really well for a lot of these characters as they went down and they got infected. It related strongly to even some of the other friends that they, like, spoiler if you haven't read up to this point yet, but with Charmy and then Victor, and there was a huge tie-in there, but the way that they go down still ties in very heavily to who they are and how they would act, and it's not always necessarily a bad quote-unquote ending to them as they get infected. It's almost like you admire them for what they're doing for everyone else that is still not infected or trying to fight for a cure.
Right. And when constructing the escalation of the arc, it was very meticulous, at least on my end, on how we ramp things up. Like the very first infections we get are rough and tumble, and that's okay because they're the Rocksteady and Bebop. They're the Jesse and James. They're the goofballs that get knocked around a bit so that we have a breather in between world-ending crises. So you're like, uh-oh, those guys got infected. That's too bad. And then Sonic gets infected. And this was something I was talking about with another interview I did earlier in the week, where the story kind of revolves around completely knocking the legs out from under Sonic. Because Sonic is such an overpowered character. He has enough super speed that he can do just about anything. If anyone is in peril, he can reach them in time and get them out of the way. If anyone's shooting at him, he can pretty much dodge whatever's coming at him. And his primary means of defeating anything is hitting it with his face at Mach 1. So how do you stop a ballistic missile with an attitude? And the answer is you make it so that everything that he does hurts him. So he can't rescue anyone now. He's infected. Touching them is a difference. He can't outrun the virus. It always creeps back to him. And the only way he can fight the Zombots, which is physically like any other robot, like he's done since 1991, only spreads the infection faster. So his key ways of dealing with any crisis are all turned around on him. And how does he deal with that? And that, to me, is the most interesting through thread of the entire arc. When you don't have Sonic there to solve all your problems, what do you do?
Yeah, and I think that's something we've all noticed is that it's really the other characters that are helping get to a final cure, a final solution to this, whereas Sonic is more or less, I feel like, assisting in trying to keep things at bay. Did you get that same thing, Justin, as you were reading these?
Yes, definitely. And with that whole thing about the friends helping him out, I just got to mention, I think it's hilarious how at the beginning of each comic it shows that little map of the world that Cream drew, and every one of his friends that falls, like there's like a big red X over that area.
Mm-hmm. That kudos to editor David Marriott for coming up with that idea. He told me about it. I'm like, oh, that's adorable and horrifying at the same time.
Exactly.
I love it.
This little girl's keeping a map of who's essentially fallen to this virus.
Yeah, it's an awesome, and we're just going to see that continue to progress as things get worse. You had mentioned the progression of Zombots, just more and more every issue. We have a question, several questions that were submitted, and the first one comes from Sonic the cosplayer. Justin, if you want to read what he asked for Ian Flynn.
He wanted to ask, did you get your inspiration for the Zombot story from the old school George A. Romero films?
I did not, because I'm a huge weenie when it comes to horror films.
Really?
I can't do anything remotely spooky. Like, the original Alien is just about too much for me. I'm that tepid. It's sad, really. So, really, the origin of this was back in the Archie days, years ago, when the editor at the time said, zombies are the hot thing, because this is when Walking Dead was a big thing and whatnot, which I have also not read or seen. I just know it has zombies and baseball bats with horrible ends. And he said, let's do a zombie arc, because, Afterlife with Archie is huge, and, zombies are huge right now. And I'm like, do we have to? Do we have to pander to that? Okay, let me figure out how to do a Sonic zombie story. And son of a gun, I figured out a way that I thought would be really cool. And then orders came from on high. Well, no, we don't want to oversaturate the zombie market here at Archie. No zombie story. But I'd figured it out. I wanted to tell the story now. I knew how to do it. So it got put on the back burner, and we talked about working it in. It might have been before the reboot, and then after the reboot, and it just never came to be. And then, famously, the licensing agreement ended between Sega and Archie, and IDW picked it up. So we did our first arc, where I was focusing very heavily on, rebuilding what the idea of a Sonic comic was. A nice, short, concise season one, keep it very, very close to the source material. And Sega had been so cool with everything that I'd pitched for season one. I'm like, well, let's go for broke. I dust off the zombie idea. We'll throw it in for season two, see what they say. They're going to reject it. I'll come up with something else and we'll be fine. And they accepted it. And I said, oh, really? Well, what if we did this with it? Yeah, okay. And it's with it. Yeah, sure. And then this character goes down. Yeah, cool. All right. You called my bluff. Let's do it. And then the more that we delved into it and the more we fleshed it out, the bigger it got. And it's like, okay, this is getting a little longer than I initially intended, but you also don't want to rush the finale because you've built up so much. You want to have a satisfying conclusion. We worked with Sega for a while. We plotted out the whole thing. The Metal Virus arc is plotted out to a conclusion. I am working on wrapping it up now, and you'll see where it goes from there.
I have a follow-up question to that, and I know we had touched on this as we were getting ready to, as IDW was getting ready to launch Sonic the Hedgehog. Have they gotten more receptive to a lot of these new ideas like the Zombot story now that you're almost 2 years into Sonic the Hedgehog? Is it about the same as far as the process of what you get approved by Sega and what doesn't?
It's about the same as when we started. It's just that I have had more opportunity to push the envelope and see where we can go. One thing to keep in mind is that IDW Sonic is very, very young. Like, we are just coming up on the 2-year anniversary, and we're only partway through the second story arc. So there is so much more territory to cover and stories to explore and characters to play with. I mean, when you compare it to what all has come before, the original Archie run, the British run that ran for so long, you compare our, paltry 20-something comics to those, and it makes you feel a little tiny. And it's like we have big shoes to fill. We have large legacies to live up to, but I think we are well on our way to pursuing that goal.
Definitely off to an amazing start, Ian. You and the team at Sonic the Hedgehog IDW. Justin, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to jump right in. It does relate to what you were just talking about. Another question here from at @DShay25, who asked, quote, from initial ideas to final draft, how long does it take you to write a script for each comic, end quote?
That varies in part due to how long it takes for things to get translated, how long it takes things to get approved. If Sega is very busy with something else, it may take us a while to hear back. But generally speaking, from springboard to breakdowns to manuscript to final draft, I would say it usually takes about a month for everything to go by the editor, to get revised, to go by the licensor, to get revised, etc., etc., etc. That's just for the script stage. I've already zoned out. Was the question about the whole book?
I think it says write a script for each comic. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because when you take in all the art has to go in, yeah, it's more than a month. But for just the writing side, I'd say it averages out to about a month.
Gotcha. And I've had some writers on in the past that will say, I have this story planned out as the next arc. How far out in your mind do you already have some ideas for arcs after Zombot wraps up?
Well, if let's just say in this magical realm where IDW wants me and only me, and Sega is cool with everything, I could probably take us out to 2026 right now with various storylines. That's what I love about this franchise. It's such fertile ground because every time you wrap up a story, it's like, okay, where do you go from here? What are the ramifications of this story? Or what is this idea perhaps from a game that wasn't fully explored? What can we do with that? And in between, these arcs, a new game is bound to come out that will introduce new ideas and new concepts. And can we tie it to those? Can we work with those? Can we go nuts with that? So yeah, it's really easy to write Sonic and never stop. I won't be inclined to tease anything past Metal Virus just because we're still knee deep in it. I want to keep our focus on where we're doing with season 2.
Gotcha. And Justin, as you've been reading these comics and you've played all these games, you mentioned some of the extra exploration they've been able to do from the gaming world. Is there anything that you spotted yourself that you were like, oh, that's interesting, I recognize that from that game, and I'm glad that they brought them in already to the IDW comic, or something that they maybe expanded on that you were wondering about as you played the games?
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed a lot of little references here and there, definitely. I'm glad they included, what's his name from Sonic Advance 3 and Sonic Battle, the robot.
Gimmerl.
Yeah, Gimmerl, right. That's another minor character that I'm glad to see included. And, there's tons of references hidden in the backgrounds and stuff, especially, in some of the earlier issues.
And another question here from Tim S., who asked, quote, where's Infinite? Why hasn't he even been mentioned? End quote.
Infinite is off limits right now. That's all I got.
Gotcha. And all right, we've got a couple more that are kind of in relation to that, and something that even I've noticed, asked time and time again, and it's something that will probably keep popping up anyway. But I know that Cameron L. asked, and these are going to be back-to-back questions because they're pretty much going to have the same answer. Cameron L. asked, will Freedom Fighters ever make their way into IDW or in anything ever? And then Michael S. also asked, can we get some STC cameos in this series too?
A lot of these questions you can find answered on my website. Go to bumbleking.com and look under the FAQ section. There's one dedicated entirely to Sonic, and that covers a lot of stuff that I get asked all the time. But since we're here, what shows up in the book is up to IDW and up to Sega. So whether they want to bring back the Freedom Fighters is entirely up to them. I know I would be fine with it. I have multiple scenarios on how I could do it, but it's ultimately up to them. Same goes for the Sonic the Comic characters, who I think might be in more of a legal tangle than the Freedom Fighters, because from my understanding, the STC crew all the creators individually own the copyrights for their creations, despite it being a licensed book. But I am not 100% certain on that, just because I don't really know British copyright law or what the deal was between Fleetway and Sega at the time. That is something for people much higher paid than me to figure out. But for right now, at least, I know that IDW and Sega want us to make IDW Sonic its own thing, to have its clear individual identity, and bringing in the characters and elements from other spin-offs would kind of muddy those waters. When I get the green light, sure, love to. It'd be great to see some of these guys back. But if not, then not up to me.
Yeah, it's very similar to what a lot of people have said on DC Comics and Marvel, and it obviously works the same with any kind of property, is it's not up to the creators themselves to make this stuff happen. A lot of that has to go through editorial and the legal department, of course. There's a lot of hoops to jump through to make something like that happen. So it's not easy, and it's definitely not something that the creators themselves can simply make happen. So I think that's very important to recognize it with not just Sonic, but with all properties. Justin, it sounded like you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm one of the few people that I actually don't really want to see the Freedom Fighters in there because, you know, you guys got this like blank slate when IDW came to be, the Sonic IDW comic, and you're not like tied down to previous characters, previous story arcs, you know, that people would probably want to see or expect to see with the, you know, the Freedom Fighter characters. So you have much more free range without them, in my opinion.
Well, another thing is that if we were just purely speculation here, if we were to bring the Freedom Fighters back, it would most likely be the IDW version, which in turn would probably have to be based off of the old Sat AM show, because the Archie versions would probably be off the table entirely. So these would be brand new takes. And I think that's something that folks don't really fully appreciate or understand, is that there are like 3 different versions of these characters. There's the cartoon version, the pre-reboot version, and the post-reboot version. And IDW would be a 4th incarnation. A lot of stuff that you take for granted as, oh, this is intrinsic to the character, came from the comics and would not be part of those characters. So it would have to be something new, more than likely. At that point, the question is, do you want that? I think a lot of folks, when they say they want the Freedom Fighters back, they're thinking the post-reboot versions, and that most likely would not be it. So if you want the characters back, what form do you want them in? Do you want them in just as their core identities in a new way, or do you want a specific interpretation back? Because one is more likely than the other.
And I think that bringing back these characters obviously would have a whole world of expectations from the fans, but it would really undercut this cast of great new characters that are already here, that are already growing into their own, and some have their own miniseries, as we mentioned earlier, with Tangle and Whisper. So to let those kind of get undercut and put to the wayside by bringing back these other characters, or characters even that haven't yet been introduced, which I think you've done awesome in slowly introducing the cast of Sonic characters throughout these arcs, and also new ones next to these. That way they're not being kind of forgotten or overshadowed by some of the characters that we already recognize.
Sure. They if they were to come back, and if they're the new versions, lots of ifs here, we would definitely need to find a way to fold them into the Sonic universe in the same way that we've done with Tangle and Whisper, Rough Tumble, Starline, all of them. Given the prominence, I guess, in the fandom, maybe they would get their own little special story arc. I don't know. There's a lot of factors that would have to be addressed well before I could even begin to plot something out.
I will say, from what we've seen already in the first arc and now in this one, I was very happy as a Knuckles fan. I will say that. And then also, Justin, Eggman's your favorite, right?
For sure.
How have you felt about this arc from the beginning, where it was kind of like an amnesia Eggman to this progression that we've gotten in this major story arc?
I loved it. I thought it was pretty hilarious, just the thought of Eggman sitting around, like, being the Tinkerer, whatever they called him. Not wanting to do evil anymore. if he never got like his memory back and stuff, I would love to have seen where that went.
Was there a moment where you didn't believe that either, just like Sonic?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that was good, and I did feel a little bit sad that it's like, oh man, the toy maker is gone, but it's like, no, we need Eggman though. It's not Sonic the Hedgehog quite without him. And Ian, I thought that was a good lead up into this story arc, these threads that you left in the first one, into what ended up being this much worse situation, I think, with what we're in right now.
Thank you. I wanted the transition from Tinker back to Eggman to hurt a little bit. You know, you only got to see him for just a little bit, but you know, I tried to make him just so charming that when he goes back to Eggman, it's like, well, we got the fun Eggman back, but Tinker was such a granddaddy. I don't want him to go. No.
It's very true. And
also, a fun little Easter egg in case you missed it. The design for Mr. Tinker was based off of early pre-Sonic 1 concept art for Eggman.
Yeah, I noticed that.
that's really cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
One of the early concepts for the mascot for the game, before they even settled on Sonic, was this Teddy Roosevelt looking guy in a pink shirt and green pants pajamas.
Yeah, pink with white polka dots, right?
Yep. We couldn't get the polka dots for some reason. The polka dots were rejected from the design, but we got to keep the color scheme, so the nod is there.
Yeah, and that's one reason, you know, I love Eggman so much is because, you know, the whole Teddy Roosevelt thing, and even in Sonic Boom, his whole outfit looks like Teddy Roosevelt's war outfit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the army. I just think that's hilarious. Yeah, if you look at the concept art for Eggman and like Sonic 06, like, you know, remember they had that really realistic looking Eggman? Like, he originally looked like just like Teddy Roosevelt. It was pretty funny.
I got to ask now too, if we're talking about Easter egg origins, are we going to work in that comic book origin of Sonic the Hedgehog? I forgot which Marvel comic it was, but how he gets his blue color.
That was folded into the Fleetway origin story, so I'm pretty sure that's off limits.
Gotcha. Cool. I didn't know if there was a way to kind of sneak that in there. Now that we have Tangle and Whisper getting ready to finish off in its mini-series, and you have ideas for story arcs and up to 2026 for the Sonic comic, I'm guessing then you have to there must be ideas too of other miniseries for some of these other characters in the future.
I was just thought that too.
I'm just going to toss out my hashtag knowing smile on that one.
That's good news. I'm gonna say good news for 2020. I'm gonna settle on that.
Only because things haven't been fully approved yet, so I can't really tease it.
Justin, do you have any follow-up questions for Ian on the comic so far or on the future of the book?
I do have two questions for you. Earlier, you talked about how like you were getting more comfortable with like pushing the bar as far as what you could get approved from Sega. As the comic ages and gets a little bit older, you know, maybe in a couple of years, are you like going to really push the bar and like, you know, bring back this whole horror thing and try to do like a Pennywise style story where Sonic and crew have to face their worst fears? And are you going to try to push it more and more, or are you going to try to, you know, cap it off like how it is now?
I think we've gotten so far off what is kind of the beaten path with this arc that in the immediate future, we need to steer it a little closer to brand. Just because if we dwell in the dark side too long, it stops feeling like Sonic. The Metal Virus Saga is rather unique for the franchise entirely, and it's been a really interesting experience going through it all. But I feel like that once this is done, we can say, okay, this was a neat experiment. Let's do something different for a while. And then maybe we can return to testing the characters on a psychological level. But that's going so far down the line, who can say?
And my other question was going to be, a lot of other fellow Sonic fans talk about Sonic crossing over with other properties, you know, not, you know, necessarily another comic property or whatever. And everybody throws out their ideas of what other franchise they would like to see Sonic cross over with. Do you have any personal opinions on that? Like, are there any franchises you would personally like to see a Sonic crossover with?
It kind of needs to be with Mario that doesn't involve the Olympic Games. For pity's sake, Mario had a more interesting crossover with the Rabbids, of all things, for an XCOM style shooter. If that can happen, then we should be able to get our rollicking adventure with Sonic and Mario. A lot of other properties, it would be a question of how well they would mesh. I'm kind of tickled with the idea of Sonic meeting the Star Fox cast, and they have this long debate over the value of wearing or not wearing pants. And Tails just geeking out over the R-Wing tech. I don't know. Sonic is kind of its own special type of universe that really would be odd fitting with other universes. Like, I can't really see it working too well with necessarily Kirby, just because Kirby is so light and fluffy with the sudden sharp left turn into nightmare fuel, and Sonic is so talkative in comparison. Then again, I wouldn't say that Sonic and Mega Man would necessarily cross over that well in terms of gameplay, but we had a ton of fun in the old run with that comic series. That's probably some of the best writing I've ever done.
That's great.
Goodness, oh my God, that was such an experience. I love that first crossover so very, very much. So,
Worlds Collide was actually what got me back into reading the book, because I got out of it for a few years, and when I saw Worlds Collide on the shelf, I picked it up and I was hooked.
I know Justin and I had talked about it on his channel for a little bit on the crossover ideas and some of the fun. Justin, was there a crossover just out of why not? If you had all control to have a crossover, is there one that you would want to see?
There's two I've always wanted to see. Dragon Ball.
Yeah, okay.
Super Saiyan Goku and Vegeta and all them with Super Sonic.
Tons of parallels. Yeah, absolutely.
That would be epic. And Adventure Time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, okay.
Just because, they kind of, not only are the worlds kind of similar, but I feel like the characters would go together great. If it was still a thing, I would say regular show, but I don't know. Now I feel like more like Adventure Time.
No, I think you're right, because they both have that kind of psychedelic world where anything can kind of happen. You've got your blue hero and their orange sidekick.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. But, so they have all these different kingdoms in the Adventure Time world, Land of Ooh, that are basically, like Sonic zones.
Yeah. Man, just put Ice King and Eggman in a room together. That writes itself.
The one I threw out on his channel was simply for the fact that I'd want to see this. And I know IDW and DC have worked well, even recently, with their crossovers, is just to see the DC Universe crossover with Sonic the Hedgehog for that three-way race between Superman, Flash, and Sonic the Hedgehog, recreating those classic covers from all the different races, but match them up with, replace them with Sonic and DC characters. That'd be an amazing line of variants and something I would sell from now until the end of time.
Sure.
I think as we, for some of the readers that are listening that maybe haven't yet jumped onto Sonic the Hedgehog, as you mentioned with issue 25, it's going to get to the lowest point, or at least where the stakes are the highest for this particular story arc. And I know we have, I believe, 3 trade paperbacks out now that readers can catch up on. 4 now. So the 4th one has released?
Yes.
Gotcha. Is there a recommended jumping on point for readers that want to catch up on Zombot, or are they well off just jumping in? Because I know that you guys do include that summary page at the beginning of every comic.
Right. Every issue you should be able to jump in and at least get the gist of that story. If you want to experience the full ride, I'd say start with volume 4 and catch up from there. If you want to get the whole shebang, season 1 is collected in trades 1, 2, and 3. Very quick read, very easy to get into, very straightforward storyline, get you who the characters are and kind of the tone and the feel for the book. And then from there, you can experience everything going to hell in a handbasket.
And if you want to read it from the first issue, head over to your local comic shop, because a lot of them should still have some leftover copies of the Halloween Comic Fest issue number 1 reprinting for Sonic. And then you can pick that up, and that'll give you kind of a taste of this IDW Sonic the Hedgehog run. And then from there, you can pick up volume 1, which I personally recommend starting from volume 1, because you have these new characters that are introduced, which you do see in this current arc, which I think you'll appreciate more as a reader. And honestly, we're coming up on 25 issues. It's not a whole lot, considering when you compare this to comics as a whole, to catch up on. You can catch up on this fairly easily, and I do recommend doing it, because this arc of Sonic has been tremendous. It's done really well. It's retained readership, so readers are happy. I'm happy as a reader, and it sounds like Justin is happy too. So I would say from Volume 1, jump right in. But if you do want to read this current arc, then as Ian said, Volume 4, and then collect the single issues moving forward from there. Justin, would you also, how does this compare to the previous iterations of other Sonic comics that you've read?
It definitely seems like it has much, more freedom to do what they want, and it's like the story has gone, it's straight off the path of, normal, what you would expect from a typical Sonic story, which I think is, it's great. I definitely recommend it.
Ian, do you have any other upcoming projects that readers can also latch onto if they're enjoying Sonic the Hedgehog?
Absolutely. If you want to hear me talk about Sonic a lot more, because I do a Q&A on my podcast, head over to bumbleking.com and look for the Bumblecast link. We update every other week, and we talk about all sorts of stuff. It's very similar to your program, but it always ends with a Q&A, and it's always chocked full with Sonic-related stuff. I have an original comic called Drogoon. That's Drogune. Just launched last week. Well, actually, I'm not sure when this show is going to air, so it just recently launched on November 1st. Updates every Friday. It's an original series written by me, drawn by Sonic veteran Adam Bryce Thomas. You probably know him most recently from the incredible Sonic versus Neo Metal Sonic fight in Sonic number 7. Yeah, that's him. He's doing the art, so it's freaking gorgeous. And you can also head back over to bumbleking.com. That's got links to all the stuff that I have done and everything that's coming up that I can talk about publicly on a release schedule on my calendar. So if you want to know what I'm doing, that's the place to go.
Very good. And there will be links to all of this in today's show notes. And if people want to send over a tweet over to you, where can they find you as far as Twitter, maybe Instagram or Facebook?
I am on the tweeters at Ian Flynn BKC.
Perfect. And Justin, you have a massive collection of Sonic that you share all the time. A lot of rare items especially. Where can they find your collection, and where can they find you?
Instagram and YouTube, Treasure Hunting Sonic.
Perfect. And any parting words for Ian before we wrap up?
I hope I get to meet you in person one day.
Absolutely.
Barely missed you back in 2016 at my friend Patrick's event, Sega Fan Jam.
Yeah.
I had to cancel last minute. So
that was a long and complicated mess, and I'm still kind of salty about it. I missed that. My websites will have listings of every show that I'm going to, so keep your eye on there.
Definitely.
Perfect. And yeah, absolutely hope to meet you in person as well very soon. And a huge thanks to both Justin and Ian for coming on and helping out with today's episode and really bringing the world of Sonic to the Brocat core.
Thank you so much for having me again.
All right, everyone. As always, let us know if you have any questions moving forward. I've been Darth Vader Daniel. We've had Justin and Ian Flynn on today's episode. Brocat Core, all will be well.